Hello everyone. This story is about, what if Naruto and Hinata married early? Hope you like it. Let's start. Naruto and Sasuke glared at one another for a few moments after the proctor called for the match to begin. Surprising most of the spectators, it was Sasuke who moved first. He rushed at Naruto, leading with his fist. Naruto ducked backwards, easily dodging the Uchiha's move, and swiped at his legs with a low sweeping kick. The Uchiha leapt over Naruto's attack and attempted to punch down at Naruto's head. Naruto rolled slightly and kicked up at Sasuke's midsection at the same time. Naruto's kick drove into Sasuke's stomach hard, knocking the wind from the dark-haired boy. Sasuke backed away, panting heavily, arms gripping his stomach hard. Naruto pressed his advantage and punched Sasuke across the face, sending him flying into the wall of the arena. Sasuke pulled himself out of the wall and ran at Naruto again, rage clear on his face. Naruto waited in his ready stance. Sasuke threw an angry punch at Naruto, leaving himself wide open. Naruto saw this, but didn't take it too seriously and let the opening go, not bothering to attack Sasuke. Sasuke saw this and snarled. His rage increased by the way Naruto was clearly not taking this fight seriously. He rushed at the blonde again, intending to force him to take it so. As Sasuke got close and attacked, Naruto said quietly as he dodged, "Don't take this so seriously, Sasuke. Remember the plan." Naruto wrapped a hand around Sasuke's wrist as he said this. Sasuke yanked his arm, pulling Naruto around in front of him and decked him once across the face, hard. "This is deadly serious to me," Sasuke told the blonde. "Even if it means every single person in this village dies, I will defeat you." This enraged Naruto, who kicked as hard as he could from his awkward angle. Sasuke, not expecting Naruto to attack from a position like that, took the full brunt of Naruto's attack, which landed right between his legs. Every male in the stands gripped their own crotch in sympathy. That was just dirty. Just what I'd expect of a Jinchuriki. Sasuke yelled at Naruto when he could breathe again. Naruto smirked, intentionally ignoring Sasuke's insult. "Come on, Sasuke, you know better than that. We're ninja, not samurai," he told him, then went on the attack himself. Sasuke dodged Naruto's punch and leapt away from the blonde and up the wall behind him. Naruto watched in horrified fascination as Sasuke built up chakra in the palm of his hand. No, he can't be, he wouldn't use that here, would he? Naruto thought to himself. Sure enough, as Naruto watched, Sasuke formed a blade of lightning in his palm. The Chidori. Naruto turned to the proctor and said, quietly, "If he uses that on me, I will not be held responsible for what happens to him." The proctor simply nodded as Sasuke began his charge. Naruto sighed. "I was hoping I wouldn't have to use this," he said softly, then held out a hand and formed an elemental Rasengan. Just as Sasuke was coming within range to strike at Naruto with his Chidori, the blonde held up his hand to meet the chakra blade with the spinning sphere he'd formed. The two jutsu clashed, chakra flying everywhere for a few moments. Then, the wind chakra in Naruto's elemental Rasengan cancelled the lightning chakra in Sasuke's Chidori, causing it to fail. Sasuke's momentum carried him forward, despite the loss of his own jutsu. Naruto's attack proceeded to tear into Sasuke's hand, then his arm, and eventually stopped when Sasuke's momentum ran out. By then, the elemental Rasengan was buried in Sasuke's chest. It had turned the Uchiha boy's heart into a boiling liquid. The Uchiha was dead before he hit the ground. The proctor nearly gagged when he saw the wreckage that was Sasuke Uchiha's body. Naruto scoffed and commented, "He threatened my precious people." The proctor had no choice. "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki," he said. Naruto didn't waste time bowing to the crowd. Most of them were shocked into silence anyway. Naruto simply walked away, leaving the proctor and Sasuke's body on the ground of the arena. The proctor then pulled out his copy of the tournament bracket. Round 2, Shikamaru Nara vs Kankuro. "Will you two come down here, please?" Meanwhile, in the Kage box, Tsunade was speaking to the Kazekage. By now, she suspected that this man was not who he seemed. In fact, she suspected that he was, in fact, Orochimaru in disguise, based on the information she'd been given by Gaara, Kankuro, and Temari. "That was an unexpected outcome," the man said, his voice sending slight chills up Tsunade's spine. At that moment, she became certain that her old teammate was sitting beside her. "It was only unexpected if you don't know those two," Tsunade said back. Naruto and Sasuke had a lot of bad blood between them. Sasuke reminded me of an old teammate of mine, given how arrogant he was and how little real emotion he seemed to feel. As she spoke, she watched the man beside her carefully for any sign that her ploy had been noticed. He gave none. Even so, it's a bit of a disappointment to see so promising a genin die in such a way, is it not? Orochimaru, for that is who was with Tsunade, asked in response. Tsunade looked at him in confusion. Well, really, the boy learned a jutsu created by the copy ninja, Kakashi Hatake, at such a young age, he continued. That shows quite a bit of promise. As the two Sannin spoke, Shikamaru trapped Kankuro in his shadow possession jutsu. You speak truth, I suppose, but sometimes I wonder if a person's abilities might not be made worthless by being wielded by that person, Tsunade said, barely restraining herself from glaring at her old teammate. Orochimaru chuckled. Nonsense, no matter who wields a jutsu, the move itself is still valuable for its own sake, he said then. By the way, what was the move that the Uzumaki kid used on the Uchiha at the end there? I've never seen it before. Tsunade gave a slight shrug as, on the ground, Shikamaru forfeited the match between him and Kankuro. He had spent a few minutes toying with Kankuro once he caught him in his shadow, only to find that the puppet master's puppet was still free, and the master could still control it. As a result, Shikamaru had been unable to defeat Kankuro, so he forfeited the match. Nonetheless, the two had both exhibited high levels of skill during the match. I'm not entirely sure what that jutsu was, she said honestly. This is the first time I've ever seen it myself. In the waiting area, Naruto and Hinata were talking quietly about the match they had just witnessed. Remember, Naruto, you have to beat Kankuro for our plan to work, Hinata said. Naruto nodded. Don't worry, Hinata. I won't let him win. I'm sure it'll be a fun match, he said back. Hinata looked worried, so Naruto hugged her briefly. She buried her face in his chest, smiling, and hugged him back, enjoying the scent of his body all around her. Well, that was anticlimactic, the proctor commented to Shikamaru. Yeah, well, I had the next couple hundred moves planned out in my head, but what good would it do me if I ran myself out of chakra, he responded rhetorically. He yawned. This is a huge drag anyway, so let's just forget about it. With that, the lazy boy made his way out of the arena and back up to the waiting area. A logical choice, Shino commented as the shadow user arrived. Shikamaru just nodded before slumping to the ground, falling asleep almost immediately. No one had even bothered to mention Naruto's fight or his way of ending it. The next fight was called, and it was Hinata versus Shino. Hinata hugged Naruto tightly. Naruto directed a glare at Shino, who nodded in return, promising silently that he wouldn't hurt Hinata. Both Naruto and Hinata knew Shino would give it his all, but Naruto was satisfied so long as Hinata wasn't permanently injured. Shino and Hinata made their way to the ground of the arena. It would be illogical, Shino commented on their way down, for me to drain you of all your chakra. You have 2 more fights to take part in. However, I must display my own skills as well. Hinata nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I know how you feel, Shino, she said back. I'm somewhat torn as well. I would not wish to harm your colony, but most of my moves would do so, and, as you said, we must both display our skills. As they talked, they had arrived at the ground floor in front of the proctor. He nodded as they took up their battle stances. Let the third match of the chunin exams begin, he called out and moved out of their way. Hinata didn't hesitate, she moved in and began to try to strike at Shino with her gentle fist. Shino deflected her strikes carefully, the two had trained together for months by now, after all, so Shino was fully well aware of what Hinata's taijutsu could do. The two had been dueling for several minutes when Hinata realized that Shino hadn't released his bugs yet. She stopped and fell out of her ready stance. Shino raised an eyebrow. We cannot fully display our powers if you are holding your insects back, Shino, Hinata said, her voice disappointed. Shino nodded, acknowledging her point. We also cannot display our powers if you do not activate your Byakugan, he countered. Hinata gave a nod, then smiled and activated her dojutsu. Shino nodded in return and held out his arms, insects pouring from his sleeves. For the second time in as many minutes, Hinata charged at Shino. Her Byakugan allowed her to see every minuscule movement Shino made, making predicting what he was going to do much easier. As Shino once again deflected Hinata's moves, he also sent his insects around to try to attach to Hinata's body. Hinata, however, was aware of them, she might not be able to see each insect, but she could easily see the swarm that was buzzing around her. Hinata gave a smirk and moved in on Shino again. She struck fast and hard, shutting down one chakra point after another. When she was finished, she expected her old teammate and friend to fall to the ground. Instead, he dissolved into a mass of insects. What? Hinata cried. She'd been attacking a bug clone all along? Then, where was the real Shino? Hinata had deactivated her Byakugan when he thought the match was over, which turned out to be a mistake as the real Shino, who had been hiding among his swarm, came from behind and kicked her in the back. Hinata pitched forward, then used the momentum of Shino's attack to roll back to her feet. By the time she regained her feet, Hinata's Byakugan was active again. So, you hid in your swarm while I attacked your bug clone, then attacked from behind when I dropped my guard. Smart, she said to her teammate. Shino nodded, admitting that she'd figured out what he'd done. I doubt it will work again, however, he said idly. It would be illogical to expect you to fall for the same trick twice. Hinata smirked. Indeed it would, my friend. With that, she moved again to attack Shino. This time, it was the real Shino, and he desperately deflected her gentle fist strikes to prevent losing control of his chakra. Shino ducked under a wide kick Hinata threw at him, then he managed to push off the ground with one hand and kick at Hinata's midsection at the same time. His blow landed, but it cost him. Hinata shut down the chakra points in his leg. Shino hopped around, trying to get some feeling back in his leg, but to no avail. Hinata used the time to catch her breath. Shino turned his dark gaze upon Hinata. In an attempt to catch the girl off guard, he ran at her. Engaging Hinata in taijutsu was a reckless move and he knew it, but he thought it might be worth a try. Hinata saw him coming and, using her superior speed and flexibility, dodged Shino's moves with aplomb. Nice try, Shino, she commented at one point, when she was doing the splits on the ground after ducking under one of Shino's punches, which had carried him past her. But not good enough. Rising to her feet, she made to seal the chakra point in one of Shino's shoulders, but, to her surprise, Shino preempted her by swinging with his other arm and backhanding her across the face. Hinata flew a few feet and landed hard on the ground. Wiping blood from her mouth, she rose to her feet and grinned at the bug user. Okay, that was good, she granted. Shino grinned. I've told you many times, Hinata, that you should never underestimate your opponent, no matter how weak they may seem, he told her. Hinata nodded. Indeed you have, she answered. I will not be making that mistake again. With that, the Hyuga girl moved again, this time in a diving kick that would have swept Shino's feet from under him. Shino carefully calculated the risk, then jumped to avoid the kick. He would have been unable to fight had he lost both his legs. Hinata rose quickly and, as he was coming down, hit his right shoulder, effectively numbing his dominant hand. Shino nodded to Hinata, who dropped out of her ready stance. Proctor, Shino said in his normal monotone. I withdraw. The proctor grinned around the Senbon needle in his mouth and called the match. Winner, Hinata Hyuga, he said. The crow cheered. Despite the relative brevity of the match, especially compared to Shikamaru's time-wasting tactics, it had been a fun one to watch. Hinata bowed, then she and Shino made their way back to the waiting area to rejoin their friends. As they walked, Hinata unsealed Shino's chakra points. That was an awesome match, you too. Naruto said enthusiastically as the two returned to the balcony. Yes, most invigorating. Lee yelled out. Temari and Lee, knowing they would be the opponents for the next match, made their individual ways to the ground. Temari rode her fan down, using the wind to support herself, and Lee simply leapt to the ground, landing hard due to the weights he had strapped on his arms and legs again. The proctor started the fourth and final match of the first round. Lee and Temari faced off, both excited, both nervous. Temari was worried, this was the boy who had beaten Gaara. Lee was excited and nervous, this girl had brutally defeated Tenten, but she no longer looked the same as she had then. Then, she had had the look of a killer, now she had the look of an honorable opponent. Lee couldn't wait to fight her. Let us make this a most glorious match, he called to the blonde Kunoichi. Temari gave a small smile. Yes, I think that is a good idea, she said, pulling out her fan with all three moons showing. Temari swung her fan. Wind Scythe Jutsu, she cried, sending a gust of cutting wind at Lee. Lee moved, dodging to the side. Temari's jutsu slammed into a tree and tore it apart. Lee grinned, this girl wasn't messing around. Lee decided it was time for him to attack this time. He circled Temari in an ever-tightening circle, kicking up dust as he went to obscure her view. Temari sighed, rolled her eyes, and swung her fan again. This time, rather than doing a jutsu, she just blew away the dust Lee had produced. Lee snarled, frustrated, then made a second attempt at getting closer to Temari. She could see him coming, sort of, but Lee was moving so fast, Temari couldn't do much about it. Lee swung, his fist crashing hard into Temari's face and sending her flying. She made a matching imprint next to Sasuke's from earlier. The way the shapes lined up, it looked like the two had been holding hands when they slammed into the wall. Naruto, noticing this up in the balcony, snickered. By the time Temari pulled herself out of the wall, Lee was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, what looked like a rock came hurtling out of one of the trees, straight at her. Temari swung her fan. Unfortunately for her, it wasn't a rock, it was one of Lee's leg weights. Tearing through the wind like it wasn't there, the weight slammed into Temari's fan, tearing a huge hole in it and slamming into the ground beside the kunoichi. Lee threw his other weight, which flew just over Temari's head and slammed into the ground near the first one. Temari jumped and looked behind her at the two weights. Just as she did, Lee came from behind and kicked her into the air. Jumping quickly, he got above her, planted both feet on her back, and shoved her back toward the ground. Temari slammed into the ground, face first, and didn't move again. Lee flipped over once, then landed on all fours, not far from Temari. The proctor checked on Temari, then called out, "Winner, Rock Lee." Temari groaned and rolled over, leaving a shallow imprint of her body in the ground. Lee came over to her and looked into her eyes. "You should not have insulted my teammate," he said simply, then held out a hand to the girl. Temari accepted it, Lee hefted her to her feet, and the two departed the arena floor, making their way back to the balcony. Tsunade stood and walked to the front of the Kage box. "With the 4 contestants who will be proceeding to the second round, please return to the arena floor," she called out. Naruto, Hinata, Lee, and Kankuro made their way back down. "I am proud of you 4. Now, we will have a brief break to allow our contestants to rest. Feel free to move about the stadium, but we ask that no one leave the premises until the other 2 rounds are complete. We will reconvene in half an hour." That said, the spectators rose and began milling about the stadium, while the 4 remaining contestants took a much-needed break. This would be one of their last moments of peace until after the invasion, and they all knew it. The ominous feeling in the air made each of them savor these few moments of peace. Hopefully, the battle to come could be ended before it really got going. The half-hour break between rounds had passed relatively peacefully. Murmurs could be heard around the stadium about Sasuke's declaration to Naruto during their brief battle. Not a single person, spectator, judge, or otherwise, was taking up Sasuke's cause. The Uchiha had as much as declared he hoped his own village was destroyed, or, at the very least, that he flat out didn't care what happened to it. As everyone geared up for the second round, Naruto and Kankuro were tense, expectant. Kankuro had been told that his second round match would now signal the beginning of the invasion, since Gaara had been eliminated. Orochimaru, who had spent the half hour since the first round ended walking through the stands and speaking to some of the spectators seemingly at random, never noticed the sand that was now surrounding 3 sides of his seat when he returned to his place in the Kage box. Even if he had noticed it, he would have perceived it as no threat. There was no chakra in the sand, and, besides, Gaara was on his side. Naruto and Kankuro were called and made their way to the bottom of the arena. The two faced off, Kankuro with his puppet out and Naruto in his ready stance. When the proctor began the match, Naruto moved. Kankuro's puppet moved to get in his way. Naruto simply backhanded it out of his way. Kankuro, surprised at how easily the blonde had brushed off Crow, wasn't ready for Naruto's punch, so he took it square on the jaw. Kankuro flew a few feet and rolled to a stop. Naruto chuckled, that was almost too easy. As it turned out, it was too easy. Naruto suddenly found himself airborne as a harsh uppercut came from literally below his feet. One of Kankuro's puppet's arms had been separated from the rest of the puppet, hidden in the ground, and had flown up when Naruto's guard was down and hit him square on the chin. Naruto used the momentum of the attack to flip and land in a crouch rather than on his back or head. Rubbing his jaw, he grinned at the dark-haired boy. "Good move, Kankuro," he said. "But it won't be working again." Kankuro just grinned and twitched his hands as he regained his feet. Crow's limbs all detached, along with his head, and each extremity grew a blade from where it had been joined to the puppet's torso. Kankuro sent these 5 blades flying at his blonde opponent at insane speeds. Naruto was barely able to dodge them all. The head, which impaled the ground, seemed to be glaring up at Naruto. Naruto chuckled and picked it up. Tossing it into the air once, he punched it hard when it came down, sending it flying toward the puppet master. Kankuro managed to regain control of Crow's head seconds before the blade coming from it impaled his throat. Naruto grinned as he formed a slew of shadow clones. "You might have been able to hit one of me," one said. "But how about all of us?" another asked. Kankuro grinned. This was going to be fun. Crow flew through the air, throwing pellets at the crowd of blonde clones. The pellets each exploded into dark smoke. Kankuro wasn't using poison here, but he wasn't above using smoke to hide. He leapt into the trees near one wall of the arena and had Crow begin to thin the ranks of Naruto's clones. Naruto chuckled as he felt his clones dispelling. One had happened to see Kankuro moving into the trees. Naruto made a slew more to replenish the numbers, then slipped into the trees himself. As Crow flew, hitting here, stabbing there, impaling next, the real Naruto hid himself among the trees where Kankuro was hiding already. The blonde quietly formed a Rasengan in one hand. When he felt the last of his clones dispel, he moved. Naruto charged at the tree where Kankuro had hidden himself. Rasengan, he called as he plowed it into the tree, which was reduced to splinters. Kankuro was barely able to jump out of the tree and land back in the middle of the arena. He hated to admit it, but he was impressed Naruto had found him so easily. He was beginning to believe this boy really could have killed Gaara. Naruto chuckled and made his way back out of the trees to face off with Kankuro again. "I sensed a presence on my first C rank that even my Jonin sensei didn't notice, and you really think you can hide from me?" he asked rhetorically. Kankuro was surprised to hear that, but, when he thought about it, he really shouldn't have been. All he really knew about the blonde in front of him was that he could have killed Gaara, of all people. "Maybe I can't hide," Kankuro said then, smirking. "But I don't really need to when I can defeat you without hiding, do I?" Naruto shook his head in a way that silently screamed, "If you only knew." Kankuro just smirked at the blonde's overconfidence and moved his hands to send Crow at the boy again. Crow flew at Naruto, mouth open. Naruto ducked under the puppet and kicked upward, weight supported on his arms. The puppet took the brunt of the attack on its torso, which shattered on impact. Obviously, Crow's arms, legs, and head were still deadly weapons, but its torso was now useless. Naruto ran at the puppet master. As Kankuro ducked under Naruto's kick, the blonde said softly, "I'll repair him for you after we're done here." Kankuro gave an appreciative nod in response. Kankuro gave a low sweeping kick that made Naruto jump to avoid it, then the two faced off once again. This time, it was Kankuro who attacked. Naruto dodged frantically as Crow's limbs came flying at him, only to run straight into 2 shuriken flung by Kankuro himself. Naruto's arms were each hit just above the elbow. That was the signal. In the next second, a lot happened all at once. 4 figures hidden in the crowd leapt from their disguises to the roof of the Kage box. Orochimaru stood and grabbed Tsunade, kunai to her throat. A genjutsu was cast on the spectators. Causing them to fall asleep, Kankuro flung the 5 pieces of crow that were still usable toward the Kage box, seemingly aiming for Tsunade. Gaara rose to his feet and wrapped both Tsunade and Orochimaru's feet in the sand that had been behind Orochimaru's chair so that neither could move from where they stood. And close to 30 Leaf Anbu began moving through the crowd, killing anything that was awake and wearing a sound headband. While the Leaf Anbu exterminated the sound invaders who had been hiding in the stands, Gaara stepped into the Kage box and glared at Orochimaru. "So, Gaara, you've made yourself known. What is the meaning of this?" the Kazekage snarled. "You were meant to aid the invasion, not impede me." Gaara just grinned before releasing Tsunade from his sand. At the same moment, Tsunade leaned forward and bit Orochimaru's hand, causing him to drop the kunai at her throat and allowing her to get away from him. Gaara quickly surrounded the snake Sannin with sand. Orochimaru ranted from within the sand coffin that so simple a move would not kill him, that he would escape it eventually, on and on. Gaara held up a hand and formed a fist. Orochimaru's rant suddenly ceased as the Sannin became the Ninen. Tsunade gave Gaara a wry smile. "That was anticlimactic," she commented. Shaking her head, she continued to think one of the Sannin would be killed by a lowly genin. Gaara chuckled. "True, but I'm no ordinary genin," he said. Tsunade nodded, granting his point. Meanwhile, on the roof of the Kage box, the Sound Four, as they were known, found themselves surrounded by Leaf Anbu and quickly surrendered. The red-haired boy reformed his sand into the gourd he carried on his back. The rest of the Sound troops were quickly dispatched by Leaf Ninja, and the invasion of the Leaf Village was over before it had really begun. The very few Sand Ninja who had continued to fight against the Leaf despite Gaara's change of heart quickly surrendered or died as the entirety of the Leaf Village's military force bore down upon them. One Might Guy addressed one Kakashi Hatake. "How many did you take down, Kakashi?" he asked. Kakashi sighed. 23, he answered. Guy paused a moment to throw a final Sound Ninja through a nearby wall. "That was my 25th, he said back. "Guess I win again, Kakashi." He smiled wide, and light reflected off his teeth. Kakashi just sighed and shook his head. Guy chuckled. "I love that too cool attitude of yours, Kakashi. It is why you are my eternal rival." As the two were slowly lowering themselves out of their ready stances, a man wearing red and with long white hair landed hard beside them. Kakashi blinked once. "Oh, hi Jiraiya," he said calmly. Guy, on the other hand, leapt about a foot in the air. "Master Jiraiya," he said excitedly. "It is an honor to finally meet you." He shook the man's hand hard. Jiraiya eventually extracted his hand from the green-wearing Jonins. "Yes, you as well, Guy," he said back. "Kakashi, Guy, I was sent to fetch you too and bring you to the Kage box, so please, follow me." Within minutes, Gaara, Temari, Kankuro, Naruto, Tsunade, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Guy were all in the Kage box and a silencing seal was in place to keep their conversation private. Tsunade spoke quietly, "We have a problem." Everyone came to attention at that. Shikamaru was missing. XXXXXX. Meanwhile, Baki was running toward the main gate of the Leaf Village with a human-shaped bundle under his arm. He was one of the very few Sand Jonin who had remained loyal to the Kazekage despite Gaara switching sides. Now, he was the only Sand Ninja left who was brave enough or stupid enough to stand up against the Jinchuriki. He had made his way to the waiting area for candidates and abducted one Shikamaru Nara. Now, he was running. Shikamaru, meanwhile, was slowly waking up. Baki hadn't bothered to cast a sleeping jutsu on the already asleep shadow user. Suddenly, Baki tripped and landed flat on his face, leaving Shikamaru to roll away from the Jonin as the two landed hard on the ground. Shikamaru rolled to his feet quickly and faced the man. Baki rose and the two glared at each other. Neither wanted to make the first move. Shikamaru chuckled, the Sand Jonin had taken him to the ideal environment for him, they were surrounded by shadows. Baki eventually made to attack Shikamaru. Wind chakra building around him as he moved with the intent of cutting Shikamaru to bits as he had recently done to a certain Leaf Jonin who had seen him and Kabuto talking. Shikamaru groaned, this was going to be such a drag. He reached out with his chakra and took control of as many shadows as he could in the immediate vicinity. Baki found himself being pushed around hither and thither by the shadows. Shikamaru snarled at the man. "You know, this is a total drag, but you really should have known better than to try to attack the Leaf Village. Every single one of us will put our lives on the line to stop you, regardless of our rank." With that, the young boy began to send sharper shadows at the Jonin. Baki, unable to do much in the darkness of the forest, was pierced several times as he tried to throw wind blades at the young Nara, which were dodged easily. Baki snarled. "Yes, you would put your lives on the line for your village, just as I am doing for mine," he said back. With that, he ran at Shikamaru again, wind blades flying fast. Shikamaru, groaning that everything was a major drag, fell completely backward to dodge the blades, and sent a single shadow toward the running man at the same time. Baki suddenly froze. "Shadow possession, complete," Shikamaru said smugly. "Now, until my comrades get here, why don't we have a little chat?" Baki snarled, but Shikamaru ignored him. Shikamaru moved backward a short distance, Baki imitating him, and sat on a rock, much to Baki's annoyance. The Jonin was forced to stand in the exact position Shikamaru was sitting in with absolutely nothing to support him. "Look, Baki," Shikamaru said. "I know you think you're fighting for your village, but the man who you think is your Kazekage isn't, that was Orochimaru." Baki looked shocked at this. "Your Kazekage never made it to this village, he was killed on his way here." "Okay, let's assume for the moment that I believe you," Baki said after a moment. "Why would you tell me this, and why would it matter?" I was ordered to attack, that's all that matters. Shikamaru facepalmed. Think for yourself, Baki. Do you really think Orochimaru would be true to his word and not betray your village the way he betrayed his own years ago? Come on, man, think, he said exasperatedly. Plus, even your own students are fighting against you, so why keep fighting when even they don't think what you're doing is in the best interests of your village? Baki slowly nodded. Alright, I surrender, he said. Shikamaru promptly released the man from his shadow possession jutsu, which resulted in his sore and tired legs giving way and Baki falling to the ground in a very undignified manner. Just then, Kakashi and Guy arrived on the scene with Pakken leading them. XXXXXX. Back in the arena, the crowd was waking up. Tsunade called out to them, "We apologize for the interruption. The previous match was called due to circumstances, and Kankuro forfeited, so Naruto will advance to the finals. Proctor, please begin the next match." The proctor nodded. "Hinata Hyuga and Rock Lee, please come down," he yelled. When the two contestants were both on the ground of the arena, he called, "And now the final match of the semifinals begins." That said, he jumped out of the way. Hinata and Lee faced off, each in a ready stance, Hinata with her Byakugan blazing. Lee spoke first. "Lady Hinata, let us make this match as youthful and exciting as we can," he said to her. Hinata smiled slightly. Despite the way Niji always talked about Lee, Hinata rather liked the enthusiastic boy. She held out one hand to Lee, who moved forward to shake it. "Yes, Lee, let us give the spectators a show," she said back. Both backed up again, and the match began. Hinata moved first, her hands blazing with chakra. Lee dodged and deflected her attacks frantically, knowing that even a glancing blow could cause serious damage. Hinata smirked. This wasn't the typical fight for the finals of the chunin exams, but oh well. She went in for a low sweeping kick, which sent Lee spinning as it connected with his arm, which he had been balancing on after dodging her previous attack. Lee rose to his feet after Hinata's attack and grinned at the girl. "I see now why you were able to defeat Niji," he said. Hinata just smirked. "Alright then, my turn." With that, Lee ran at Hinata, arms and legs flying quickly. Hinata dodged and blocked his attacks easily, but just then Lee put on a burst of speed. Leaf Whirlwind, he called out as his final kick connected with Hinata's cheek, sending the girl flying a few feet. She came to rest on her back. Rising to her feet again, the girl breathed hard a few seconds and wiped blood from her mouth. She smiled at Lee and commented lightly, "A fine attack, Lee." Lee grinned and nodded. But not good enough. She ran at him again, Byakugan active, hands flying quickly. Lee, unprepared for her to attack again so quickly or aggressively, was barely able to block or deflect her moves. Hinata made a single clone with neither word nor hand sign, which formed a low-powered Rasengan and attacked the distracted Lee from behind. Lee was sent flying again, this time ending up buried in the far wall of the arena, dazed. The proctor went to check on Lee. "Lee is unable to continue," he called out. "Winner, Hinata Hyuga." Tsunade rose to her feet and called out, "This concludes the semi-final round of the chunin exams. We again ask that no one leave the arena until after the final round, but we will once again give you and the contestants a half hour to rest and recover before the finals." That said, she slumped into her chair, emotionally drained after the events of the day. Jiraiya came up behind Tsunade and rested his hands on her shoulders. "Hey," he said simply. Tsunade looked up at her one remaining teammate and smiled tiredly. Jiraiya knelt in front of her and took her hand gently in his. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think I'll be fine," Tsunade answered after a moment. "Thanks." Jiraiya just patted her hand. Tsunade let loose a few tears. "I know I shouldn't be sad, but he was still my teammate." Jiraiya raised himself up and hugged Tsunade. Both of the remaining Sannin sobbed for a few moments for the loss of their old comrade. Jiraiya calmed down first, then held Tsunade while she cried herself out. As he pulled back, he kissed her on the cheek playfully. Tsunade looked at him in surprise. Jiraiya flinched away, fear evident, he was expecting to get beat for that. Tsunade just smiled, then leaned in and kissed Jiraiya's cheek. Jiraiya grinned and stood a small distance behind and to the side of Tsunade. He would remain there until the finals were completed. Maybe everything will turn out all right after all, the old sage thought to himself. This was all for now. Thank you for watching, I hope you liked it and that you will be back for more. Please like, share and subscribe. See ya.